Is this philodendron gigas too small for a moss pole? When choosing the appropriate size, you want to use the same concept as choosing the appropriate sized pot for your houseplant. You just don't want to go with something too large. It has nothing to do with the height of the pole itself, more so to do with the width or the actual size of it. I'm using the plastic D-shaped moss poles from THICCLY. I absolutely love these ones. I prefer this because it retains moisture much longer than those round DIY ones. If I were to use this pole with this tiny little cutting, you can see the stem is pretty small and it's actually just a little node propagation. If I was to use this pole in this size pot, you want a pot large enough to accommodate the plant and the pole. If I was to plant this little cutting with probably a very small root system in this pot, the pot size is just way too large. There's too much soil and it's going to retain too much soil moisture. Now if I come on over to here, there is a smaller version. Again, this is a THICCLY pole. This is the small D-shaped moss pole. Now, I don't need as large of a pot. So when you place it in this pot, you can see there's definitely less soil than there would be if it was in this one. Simply for the reason you don't want the soil staying wet for too long, because that's where you run into the root rot issue, is when the soil doesn't dry out fast enough and those roots just remain wet for too long. Now I'm okay with this size pot just because this small little cup, it dries out way too fast, and this gigas, it's been getting kind of these curling leaves. So I just watered it right now, and it's also been under attack of thrips. You can see there's basically some little veining or some little scarring on the leaf here. So I treated it, I watered it, now it's time to get it out of this pot and place it on the moss pole. I have another plant right over here that I want to put on a moss pole as well. This is the variegated Bob C. It's in a very small pot, but it's got a nice sized stem. So a pot size like this on the medium-sized moss pole would be, oh goodness, everything's falling over. Basically, it's just one pot size larger than the last, so when you account for the size of the moss pole, it's probably gonna be the same size as this pot. Now for placing this on the moss pole, there's a couple techniques that I use. So first I'm gonna take the cutting out of the pot. I'm actually curious to see what kind of roots this tiny little cutting has. Actually pretty decent roots. So I thought it was going to be much smaller, so I'm not going to disturb it too much. It has roots at the bottom and kind of throughout the soil here, so pot size like this will be appropriate. Now what I like to do is with my moss poles is this will be the bottom portion, and I'll leave just a small little gap. Actually that's probably not enough, but what I like to do is fill in some aeroid mix in the bottom of the pot, so that when it's in the pot, there isn't excess moisture being held in the soil from the moss. So I'm just going to fill this portion with an aeroid mix, and that way it's consistent with what's in the pot there as well. The other tip I like to do is I will size up the cutting on the moss pole, place it in the pot like that, just so everything is lined up correctly, and then I will take some of the plant Velcro and I will secure the cutting to the moss pole. That way I'm not fumbling around with the moss pole and the plant and it flopping over while I put the soil in. So I'm just taking the plant Velcro, and that way it has good contact for those aerial roots on the moss as well. So it doesn't have to be super tight, just enough to hold the plant in place, and that way it frees up another hand here for helping out with putting in soil and all that kind of stuff. And now all I'm going to do is add in soil. I like to use an aeroid mix. This is what I use for pretty much all my houseplants. VeryPlants aeroid mix. There is a discount code in the description if you're interested in trying this out. But otherwise, I'm just going to now fill in all the soil. What I've been doing lately with my moss poles when positioning them, I don't like to have them standing like perfectly straight. I like to angle them backwards, so slightly angled backwards. And the reason for that is as the plant grows, it gets heavier, and as it gets heavier, then it's going to want to pull the moss pole forward. So I like to angle it slightly backwards just to accommodate for that growth down the road. Now I'm just going to use a pencil, poke down all the aeroid mix around the roots, and then I'm going to add some at the back of the pot here as well. And just pack that down lightly, angle it backwards, and then make sure it's standing up straight. I just watered the cutting earlier, so I'm not going to give this any more water. I don't want to completely soak the soil. I'll just kind of let it soak in what it has for now. But that is what the cutting looks like on the moss pole. So yeah, just making sure that you choose the right size of pole and pot is key for the survival of the small cutting. I'm going to do the same thing with the Bob C, but there's actually two plants. There's a smaller one right here, so I might snap that one off and grow it separately in a different pot. I'm going to use this as the back side because there's a nice chunky aerial root right here that I'm going to stick in the moss, and there's a nice kind of flat portion right there as well. The majority of the leaves are facing that way anyways, so let's take this out. I'm just going to do the same method. I have my little spoon. I'm just going to dig this out. I think it's going to be fairly root bound. Feels like some nice roots in here. So yeah, decent root system on this guy. Just going to dig away at the back side because I want as much of the stem in contact with the moss pole itself, and then I want to remove this, hopefully with a little bit of a root system to it. So I'm just going to pull that off. Okay, tiny little roots, but I think I snapped a few. But there's a small little cutting, a separate plant, so I'm going to set that aside. And then, like I said, I'm going to pick away at this here, just so there's maximum contact with the moss pole at the back. It's got some nice chunky roots here as well. So like that, you see it's pretty well flat, and I'm going to do the same thing with this plant. I'm going to attach it to the moss pole here. Oh, I didn't even add soil into the bottom of the moss pole with the little gigas. That's okay. I'll do it with this one. I completely forgot about that. And I also removed a few of the lower leaves, so that'll go right in the compost. So now I'm just going to lay this down. I'm going to flip that over, and I'm going to size it up. So maybe something like that. Oh, I have a new leaf coming out. Didn't even notice that. So I'm just holding it on the moss pole, and if I place it in the pot that I originally had selected, you can see the roots are just going to be pretty well jammed in there, and there's not going to be much room for growth. So I'm actually going to be potting it in one size larger, and you can see there is a little bit of room that I can add soil around it, and then that way it's going to allow those roots to expand as well. So I'm going to use just one size larger. Unfortunately, I don't have any more of the plant wire, so I'm just going to use a little bit of string, a little bit of twine, and the first thing I'm going to do is carefully guide this aerial root into the moss. Just kind of push it in there like that. That way it can transition from like a support root, a support aerial root, to a soil or water type root. That will help with obtaining moisture and nutrients. It's not the greatest, but it'll do the trick. Now I'm going to add some soil into the bottom of the moss pole, what I didn't do last time, and I'm just going to reuse the soil that was already in the pot. So I'm just going to stuff that in the bottom, like that. Just so you can see, we got some soil in there. I'm losing it everywhere. And now I'm going to add a little bit of soil into the bottom of this pot. So I'm going to use some new soil just to provide a kind of a bottom base layer like that. And now just place the cutting in the pot. Again, I like to angle it just slightly backwards and fill in the gaps. This one I've been wanting to get on a moss pole for a while, so it's been growing quite quickly. Also dealing with thrips on this plant, but I've been spraying it off quite frequently with just water, just straight water, just blasting them off. And then I've been using insecticidal soap, another product called Pure Crop 1. I've just been kind of switching it up a little bit, just for treatment. Now I'm just going to put some in the back, and this one is complete. I do have one more little project that I want to get done. I need to add an extension piece to my very large Philodendron domesticum, plus I want to add a little bit of a larger pot with that one as well. Again, you can see slightly angled backwards, that way it could accommodate for the weight as it continues to grow up the moss pole. Here is my large domesticum. It's beautiful, beautiful variegation on it. Here's the newest leaf. I'm just going to turn this around, rotate it a little bit, just so you can see the top. You can see, obviously it's extended past the top of the moss pole there. You can see these roots are poking through as well. So I need to add an extension piece on this, and then I'm going to pull it up here just to show this massive plant is in this tiny little pot. So I'm going to put it in something a little bit larger as well. But look at the size of this stem as it grows up the support stake. It goes from a fairly thin to a thick, beefy stem. So it's on the plant table. It's up there. I just want to show what I mean when it starts to grow up the support system and it starts to pull forward. You can see it's definitely leaning forward, and this thing has the tendency, like I'm just gonna tap it. It'll fall forward like that all the time. So it doesn't help that it's in a small pot. See, it wants to fall over right now. Having a larger pot, especially something that is heavier. I'm first going to add the extension piece on the plant, and I'm just going to flip it around, and I'll show you the roots here in a second. All of these roots at the back, that's actually really cool. So the nice thing, it's going to fall over. I'm going to lean it back here a bit. Hopefully you can see what's going on. These plastic moss poles are obviously plastic and they're made to bend. So what I like to do is leave a little bit of a gap at the bottom of this moss pole here as well, and then you can push it in and fold it. So you want this top one to go on the inside of the last one. So I'm just going to move these roots out of the way, making sure that they go in to that pole. And then I'm just going to slide them, whoop, just got hit in the face. I'm going to slide it down until it is in place like that. So super easy to add an extension piece onto an existing moss pole. So now it has 3 extensions. It can continue to grow up the moss pole, and then probably once it reaches the very top, you can't even see it, I'm going to do a chop and prop, and that's what makes doing that method of doing chop and prop so easy, is because it'll have an established root system already in the moss. So now we just need to put it in a larger pot. I'm going to lay it down here in a second, but check out all of these roots. This is so satisfying. If you're someone that likes roots, then yeah, get these moss poles, these clear ones, because it's pretty satisfying. Okay, now I'm just going to rotate it, and then I'm going to lay it down. Hopefully we have enough room here. Something like that, and then I'll take it out of this pot. Oh, don't roll over. I don't want these leaves to break off. Like that. Now I can just take this smaller pot, and just to show you the nice roots on this, and I'm going to place it in this pot like that. And now I'm going to add soil. I had to carry it around the table here because it wanted to fall over. So I'm going to start off by putting a little bit of soil in the bottom of the pot, and again I'm going to angle it backwards, or slightly backwards this time, like that. I'm going to pack it down so there's a nice base for those roots to grow into without hitting the ceiling. I'm going to place it in like that, again slightly backwards or leaning back, and then I'm going to add or fill in actually I'm just going to use my hands because I can't get the cup. I'm just going to fill in all the gaps around the existing soil. I just want it to the point where it kind of balances itself. There, something like that. It's going backwards a little bit, so I'm going to put a little bit more at the back just for support. I want to make sure that it's straight here. It's a little off center, but Making sure it's upright and then leaning backwards a little bit. Okay, like that. So now it is remaining upright on its own. I'm going to pack a little bit more at the back. And then I'm going to give the other one some water. I said I wasn't going to, but just to help settle the soil as well. You can't even see me. I'm going to give those other ones a little bit of water. So, okay. Where's my pencil? What am I doing? Should be using my pencil. Poke that down, and at the back here too. So that's pretty stable. It's not going to be going anywhere. So I'm going to place this back on the floor. So I think that's going to be pretty much it for this video. I hope you found it useful and informative. Just make sure that you choose specifically the right size pot. It doesn't matter about, like I said, the height of the moss pole. It's the appropriate size pot, just to make sure that you set it up for the best chance of success. If there's any other comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Otherwise, thanks for watching all my videos. I will definitely be providing some updates down the road. Thanks everyone. Take care. Bye.